The village of Black Hollow was silent after sunset. No one walked near the old forest anymore. 20 years ago, 5 people disappeared there in one night. Since then, villagers claimed a pale woman wandered between the trees. One stormy evening, a young traveler named Daniel arrived. Ignoring every warning, he walked toward the forest path, unaware that something had already begun watching him from the darkness behind the twisted trees. The deeper Daniel walked, the colder the air became. The wind suddenly stopped, leaving the forest completely silent. Even the insects had vanished. As he stepped over fallen branches, he noticed strange footprints in the mud. They looked human, but the toes were unnaturally long. Daniel followed them unknowingly. Behind him, something stepped softly in the exact same prints he had just left. Minutes later, Daniel heard whispering. At first, it sounded like the wind brushing through dry leaves, but the words slowly became clearer. A woman's voice softly called his name, even though he had never been here before. He turned around quickly. Nothing was there. But the trees behind him looked different now, as if they had silently moved closer. Suddenly, Daniel noticed an old house deep between the trees. Its windows were broken, and the wooden walls were blackened like something had burned it long ago. A dim yellow light flickered inside. Curiosity pulled him forward. As he pushed the door open, it slowly creaked. Inside the room stood a dusty table and 5 empty chairs facing him. Daniel stepped inside carefully. The floor groaned beneath his feet. On the table, he saw 5 old photographs. Each showed a missing villager from 20 years ago. Their faces looked terrified, but something froze Daniel's blood. A 6th photo was lying beside them. It was freshly printed, and it was a picture of him, standing outside the house minutes earlier. A cold breath touched the back of Daniel's neck. He slowly turned around. The door behind him had closed on its own. Then the yellow light above began to flicker violently. In that flashing light, he saw something sitting on one of the chairs. A pale woman with long, wet hair slowly lifted her head. Her hollow eyes locked onto him. The woman did not stand up. Instead, she slowly slid across the floor toward him without moving her legs. Her mouth opened wider than any humans could. A broken whisper escaped her throat. "You came? Just like the others." Daniel ran to the door and tried to open it, but the handle would not move, no matter how hard he pulled. The lights suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Daniel could hear something crawling across the wooden floor. The sound circled him slowly. Then something cold grabbed his ankle from the shadows. He screamed and kicked wildly. For a moment, the grip loosened, but the whispering voice was now right beside his ear. The lights flickered back on for 1 second. Daniel saw the woman standing inches away from his face. Her skin looked gray and cracked like old stone. Dark water dripped from her hair onto the floor. Behind her, the 5 empty chairs were no longer empty. 5 shadowy figures now sat there, staring silently at Daniel. Then the light went out again. Daniel felt many hands grabbing him from every direction. The whispers grew louder and louder until they sounded like screaming. Outside the forest, the storm suddenly stopped. The next morning, villagers found the house empty again. But on the dusty table, there were now 6 photographs instead of 5. Daniel woke up on the cold forest floor. Moonlight filtered through broken trees. For a moment, he thought it was a nightmare. But then he noticed the fresh mud footprints around him. They formed a circle and led back to the house. Hesitation froze him. Something deep inside warned him that the house was no longer abandoned. It had claimed him as its next victim. As Daniel approached, the old house seemed alive. The wooden walls groaned like a wounded animal. The yellow light from inside flickered faster. The door creaked open by itself, inviting him. Against every instinct, he stepped inside. The room was empty, except for the table. But the 6 photographs were gone. In their place was a single note, written in dripping red ink. "You belong now." A cold wind blew through the room, carrying whispers that twisted his mind. Daniel felt invisible hands brushing his skin. The shadows along the walls started moving, stretching toward him. Each second dragged like an eternity. His heart pounded as the pale woman reappeared, her eyes now glowing with a dark hunger. "You cannot leave," she hissed. Daniel ran for the door, but the room had changed. It was larger than before, stretching endlessly, the walls disappearing into darkness. The chairs around the table were slowly rising into the air. Each chair held a shadowy figure, their faces distorted, eyes hollow. Their silent screaming echoed in his ears. Daniel realized he was trapped in a nightmare that bent reality itself. Suddenly, the floor beneath him cracked. Daniel fell into a cold, endless void. He felt hands pulling him down, icy fingers wrapping around his arms and legs. The pale woman floated above him, her hair flowing like black smoke. She whispered, "Join them. Be forever part of Black Hollow." Desperation surged in Daniel. He struggled, but the darkness was infinite. Daniel woke again in the main room, drenched in sweat, but something was wrong. The walls were now covered with mirrors. Each reflection showed not Daniel, but a different person, screaming silently. The shadows in the mirrors reached out, smearing their faces against the glass. Behind him, he felt someone breathing, heavy, wet, and inhuman. One mirror shattered, and a hand reached out through the broken glass. Daniel stumbled back, but it was too late. The hand grabbed his wrist, cold as death. The pale woman's face appeared inside the mirror, grinning. "Time does not pass here," she whispered. Daniel screamed, but no sound escaped. He realized Black Hollow was not a place. It was a trap for souls. The room grew darker, the mirrors multiplying endlessly. Each reflection now had Daniel's face twisted in terror. The pale woman's voice grew louder. "They all came, and now you will stay." A sudden pull yanked him toward the largest mirror. He could feel his body stretching, dissolving into the glass. Around him, shadowy hands clawed from every reflection, dragging him in. Daniel's last thought was of the village outside, peaceful and safe. Then he was gone. The mirror now held only the pale reflection of someone else, another lost soul. Outside, the villagers noticed a new photograph on the dusty table inside the abandoned house. It showed a terrified young man, just arrived in Black Hollow, eyes wide with horror, already trapped in the house's eternal game. Weeks passed, and the forest remained quiet. Travelers avoided the paths, hearing tales of the cursed house. Locals whispered of Daniel's disappearance, but sometimes, on stormy nights, a pale woman could be seen gliding between the trees, and those brave enough to peek through the broken windows of the house would see 6 chairs, now holding 6 shadowed figures, staring silently, waiting for the next visitor. Months passed, and the village slowly returned to its routine. But deep in the forest, the house pulsed like a heartbeat. One evening, a group of teenagers dared each other to enter. As they approached, the air grew icy. The trees whispered in strange voices, warning them. One of them noticed footprints appearing from nowhere, wet and fresh, leading straight into the cursed house. Inside, the house had changed again. The walls were covered with hundreds of photographs. Each photo was of a missing soul. As they walked deeper, one teenager screamed. His reflection in a cracked mirror showed dozens of eyes staring at him. Shadows shifted behind every chair, and the pale woman appeared silently, gliding toward them with her long, wet hair trailing across the floor. The teenagers ran, but the house twisted around them. Corridors stretched endlessly, doors vanished, and ceilings descended like a trap. One girl tripped over a chair that wasn't there before. The others froze. From the shadows, whispers began chanting names, every name in the village, past and present. The pale woman raised her arms, summoning the darkness to swallow everything. A hand grabbed the first boy's ankle, pulling him into the shadows. He screamed, but the sound vanished. The other teenagers scattered, but every step seemed to loop back to the same room. The table held not photographs now, but small moving figures, replicas of themselves, writhing silently. The pale woman's eyes glowed brighter, reflecting all their terror. Escape was impossible. The mirrors multiplied, and every reflection was now alive. One teenager saw himself trapped, screaming silently in the glass. Another mirror cracked, releasing icy fingers that wrapped around him. The pale woman whispered, "Every soul belongs here." One by one, they were pulled into the mirrors, their bodies dissolving into shadows. Outside, the wind carried faint screams across the silent forest. The last 2 teenagers tried the door, but it was gone. The room now stretched into darkness, filled with whispering faces. A cold fog rose from the floor, wrapping around their legs. They could barely move. From the shadows, the pale woman stepped forward, her mouth wide and eyes glowing. She whispered, "Time has no meaning here, only eternity." They realized they were now trapped forever. The fog thickened, and the house seemed endless. The shadows of the missing villagers crawled along the walls, moaning silently. One teenager tried to scream, but no sound came. The pale woman circled them, leaving dark footprints that burned the floor. The mirrors reflected endless hallways with no exit. Outside, the forest seemed peaceful, hiding the horrors within its core. Suddenly, the 2 remaining teenagers found themselves back at the table. On it were now 7 photographs. Their faces were frozen in horror, identical to the missing souls. Behind them, the chairs slowly lifted off the ground, filled with shadowy figures. The pale woman's voice echoed from every corner. "You came. Now you belong. Welcome to eternity in Black Hollow." A crack of lightning illuminated the room. Shadows lunged toward them. The teenagers tried to move, but the floor became sticky like blood. Their reflections multiplied, each mirror showing a different horror. The pale woman hovered above the table now, her hair like a river of darkness. A new photograph appeared on the table, empty except for a blank space, waiting for the next soul. The forest outside remained silent for months. Travelers whispered about the cursed house, and locals avoided the path entirely. But every stormy night, villagers reported seeing faint yellow light flickering inside the forest, and sometimes a pale figure floated between the trees. Those brave enough to peek saw endless chairs, now filled with countless shadowed souls, silently staring, waiting for the next visitor. Decades later, an old man entered the village, claiming he had escaped Black Hollow. But when asked about the house, he only shook and whispered, "It never lets go. It doesn't just trap you, it remakes you." Behind him, in his pocket, a photograph fluttered. It was the old table with 6 chairs, and in one, a pale figure that looked just like him, smiling cruelly. The villagers never saw the old man again, but children reported hearing whispers at night, calling their names. Travelers who ignored the warnings vanished without a trace. Some nights, the wind carried laughter and faint cries from the forest. Black Hollow had grown larger, as if feeding on fear itself. The house waited patiently, ready to trap anyone foolish enough to enter. One stormy night, a curious scholar arrived, determined to study the legends. He stepped inside the forest, notebook in hand. The wind whispered, and the trees bent unnaturally. Footprints appeared in mud, leading him to the house. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but curiosity was stronger. As he approached, the yellow light flickered, and the door opened on its own, inviting him. Inside, the scholar saw the table. Hundreds of photographs lay scattered across it. Each face stared in silent terror. The pale woman appeared slowly, floating above the floor. She looked at him with hollow eyes, whispering, "Curiosity feeds the darkness. Will you join them?" The room shifted violently, walls stretching and folding. Shadows rose from every corner, stretching toward him like black flames. The scholar tried to leave, but the house had disappeared outside. Hallways twisted endlessly, doors vanished, and ceilings descended. Mirrors multiplied, each showing a different horrifying future. Figures from the photographs moved in the reflections, reaching out. The pale woman's voice became a scream, vibrating inside his skull. "You are mine," she hissed. Fear overtook him completely. Desperation drove him to run, but every corridor led back to the same room. On the table, a single photograph glowed. His own face appeared, frozen in terror. He understood. He had been added to the house's collection. Shadows crawled along the walls, forming hands, mouths, and eyes. The pale woman extended her arms, pulling him toward the ceiling. Darkness swallowed him whole. Outside, the forest remained calm. To anyone looking, nothing had changed. But inside, the scholar's scream echoed endlessly. The mirrors now held multiple reflections of him, trapped in eternal torment. The table had added one more chair. The pale woman hovered above it, smiling. Black Hollow had grown stronger. Another soul had been claimed, and the house waited for its next visitor. Over the next century, the house became a legend, whispered among villagers. Every few decades, travelers would vanish. Some claimed to hear faint whispers calling their names on stormy nights. The pale woman's shadow was seen gliding across the forest floor, and photographs of new victims appeared on the table. Black Hollow had become a timeless trap, feeding on fear curiosity, and despair, a young couple once dared to enter, thinking the stories were myths. They laughed as they walked through the forest, but the house appeared suddenly, looming and dark. Inside, shadows moved with intent. Mirrors reflected versions of themselves screaming silently. The pale woman hovered above the table, smiling. Chairs rose on their own. The couple ran, but the house twisted endlessly, trapping them forever. Years later, another traveler vanished. Only his hat remained on the forest floor. The house pulsed in the moonlight. Every photograph on the table now glowed faintly, showing countless souls trapped. The pale woman floated silently above them, her hair like dark rivers. Outside, the wind whispered names in a strange language. Black Hollow had no end, and the house waited for the next visitor. One stormy night, lightning revealed the house's true size. It was far larger than possible, stretching endlessly into the darkness. Shadows crawled along the walls, whispering endlessly. Any who entered became part of the table's collection. Even those who thought they escaped found themselves reflected in mirrors, screaming silently. Black Hollow had become a living nightmare, eternal and patient. Generations passed, yet the forest remained untouched. Brave souls occasionally approached, hoping to uncover its secrets, but none returned. Photographs on the table multiplied faster than anyone could count. The pale woman's presence was constant, unseen, yet everywhere. Black Hollow had grown intelligent, learning from fear, feeding from terror, always ready for the next visitor foolish enough to enter its cursed halls. A wandering historian once found the forest, documenting its legends. At night, he heard whispers of names, some of them his own. He saw flickering lights and shadowy figures moving through the trees. The forest seemed alive. When he reached the house, the door creaked open. Mirrors reflected not his face, but the countless souls already trapped. Black Hollow's hunger was infinite, patient, and unrelenting. Inside, the historian saw the table. Hundreds of photographs lay scattered, some glowing. Shadows reached for him, chilling his bones. The pale woman floated silently above, whispering in a voice that froze blood. Mirrors multiplied, trapping reflections in endless corridors. Every chair held a shadow, a whisper, a soul. The historian realized he had become the newest part of Black Hollow's eternal collection. Outside, villagers sometimes saw flickering yellow lights deep in the forest. Travelers occasionally disappeared, leaving behind only footprints and whispers. The table inside the house never stayed empty for long. New photographs appeared automatically. Chairs rose into the air by themselves. The pale woman moved among them, smiling cruelly. Black Hollow fed continuously, growing stronger with each soul it claimed. In some legends, Black Hollow was said to have no beginning or end. Souls trapped inside never aged. Their screams echoed endlessly, feeding the forest. The pale woman, timeless and patient, guided the lost toward despair. Mirrors multiplied infinitely, reflections became reality, and chairs held thousands of shadowed forms. The house waited. Always, patiently, eternally. One night, lightning struck the forest. Villagers heard distant screams, more chilling than before. The house pulsed, walls stretching impossibly. Inside, shadows moved faster, mirrors reflected infinite horrors, and the table glowed with hundreds of photographs. The pale woman hovered above it all, whispering, "They belong. All belong." Black Hollow's hunger was unending, insatiable, eternal. Time passed differently inside the house. Some who entered claimed centuries had passed, yet outside, only days had gone by. Mirrors multiplied endlessly, reflections screamed silently, and chairs held countless souls. The pale woman never aged, never faltered. The table continued collecting photographs automatically. Black Hollow had become a living entity, feeding on fear, curiosity, and the souls of the unwary. Legends say that even now, on stormy nights, whispers call from the forest. Footprints appear where no one has walked. Yellow light flickers inside the trees. Travelers vanish mysteriously, and the table in the house glows faintly with new photographs. Chairs rise into the air by themselves. The pale woman waits, patient as ever. Black Hollow's hunger continues, endless, eternal, and inevitable. The house of Black Hollow is no longer a place. It is a trap, alive and aware. Every visitor becomes part of it. Every scream adds to its power. Photographs of the lost appear on the table. Shadows fill the chairs. Mirrors multiply endlessly. The pale woman floats above, grinning cruelly. And so, the forest waits, whispering names, ready to claim the next soul who dares enter. For eternity,